save. Choose who can participate. Set a delay between messages. Add moderators. I do not know. Choose who can participate. Live. I see a prompt that I was not yet eligible for it. I was thinking all the while that to go live will be to help me with my requirement to monetize. But I chose the other alternative though at that time to prepare for a 1 hour video just so I could submit it for the watch hours to achieve the 4K in order to, prepare myself to apply for the YouTube partner policy, YPP, or monetization, which luckily I ended to have finally qualified. And that was when I was set up, I think, last week. Okay, if I may recall, around April, just about this time last week. So I'm 1 week old here in YouTube. I thought my life will not be required of me as I'm already monetized. Okay, hi. I'm glad to have found this friend. I talked to him early morning. I told him that I have this channel already in YouTube monetized. And so thank you for, I don't know if that was ever a participant or a viewer right here, as I saw the message anyway. There were proddings by my supporters if I should go, that I should go rather live on YouTube, and I could not understand why when I'm already monetized. You say I'm still learning a lot, not only here, but in my Facebook page as well, to study about the policies, the monetization, the setting up of my account, and everything that I need to know about as I would keep navigating from one button to another. I would be honest that there are still many things I am not very familiar about. And so I may have already come up to the level or the stage where I am monetized, but I could not maximize what I need to do to effectively enjoy the benefits of being monetized. Much as I would like to have someone mentor me on this, but like I have an IT kid, but this is not his specialty. Every time I would ask him to, for my concerns here, I would see him kind of smirking, and I see a nonverbal a nonverbal reaction in his face, like telling me like, oh my goodness, you still get into this stuff when at your age? Well, a lot of people didn't know why I embarked into this thing. And maybe for my followers here, because I could publish this later, this will be my perfect time to be able to explain to you why at my age and my status, I still took to be a part of this drama, if you call it. It all started actually on my birthday early this year. It was January when my friend, who I kept inviting to join me in my celebration for years, did not make it. And so I kind of invited him for an ultimatum that because I would love him to be really to see him on my birthday, which he came. And to cut the long story short, it was then that we had a perfect conversation, because this is the friend that now is my collab, who pushes me to open this page in Facebook as well as in YouTube. Because if I recall it right, this was the guy who had been actually pushing me also and insinuating if I could come up with a book, knowing that as his partner in his training, he is a motivational speaker. Maybe he drew some good points and some materials every time he would pick me to do freelance training with him. And I told him even then, earlier, that to write a book will be very easy for me, for all the things that I have imbibed in my wide reading, if only I could have someone to scribble for me the materials or the opinions that friends or people would like me to, become an element of my book. But because personally, I still have not reached that status or that level that motivates me to personally write a book. Although people had really been inching their way to convince me if I would consider writing one. I'm so lazy and I don't have that kind of motivation until the last time he came by to my house and he was asking about some materials I shared to him on emotions, which we were blessed at, not only because we handle to teach psychology during our professor days, but also because we were blessed to have enrolled a lifestyle program where the side dish of the 90-day module or training includes 8 sessions on mind mastery technique, where it helped me validate to as I browsed and listened to the materials that was given as side dish to collaborate with the earlier materials that I have gathered from the Word and from, of course, from other mentors or scientists. And that was when I decided to make a clip, just a preparation in case I will have another invitation to talk upon, because this centers more on a brain entertaining a thought, if you know what I mean. It gives me a better insight, more profound insight of how an emotion is formed and how it is driving us in our life's navigation, that being a feedback mechanism. Okay? As originally designed and as God's objective for giving us that ultimate gift that we carry at birth. And so I started my validating research to check over the opinions of the scientists that was quoted in that material, and they were just properly actually presented. And so I accept the idea and made my own clip as it collaborates or intersects with my little knowledge on the word, and I made my own material from out of that collaboration that led me to, use it in my initial shares, hoping to see whether the material will be effective enough. It first actually benefits my sibling during our first family reunion sometime last August last year. That was the only tool I carried for being the youngest in the family, who I am not familiar with the individual downloads among my other siblings, me being the last. There were stories I would like to validate among my brothers and sisters that I'm not very familiar about, because the gap between them and me for being the youngest in the family was huge. Took years before I came into this world. And there were stories that I learned from them that I could not relate, because when these stories are brought upon on the table for me to learn on, there were just some things that I cannot find validation, or they seemed to be a mystery to me as they were talking over things that I could not anymore relate. And so I navigated or traveled through life discovering a lot of things, and I missed the reality of the stories that I heard. What was the past that they were talking about that I did not come to witness about as well? And those were the downloads that wrapped their being, which unluckily was not part of my download or my experience. I could not relate to how they would see my growing process as well, in the same manner that I could not relate to what happened to theirs. And so it took a while before everyone decided to have that reunion, which happened in the north, in one of my nephew's place, where we were all accommodated and we were, brought to some places to have some family activities. But over and above, we were housed in the same residence to give me a chance to be able to validate from the material that I brought there, which was nothing less than studying the gift of emotion and how it drives every one of my siblings to the direction that they are now. And as I listened to their stories, to spot also our individual differences, even if we come from one branch, one family, which would somehow lead to, some addiction of the emotions of the past that may somehow would rise to springboard to some altercation, I would come in with the benefit of my material to tell everyone, oops, we're all grown ups. We came to bond and to reunite the stories, whatever stories we have in the past, just so we can align them, so we can understand each other better. And that led them to align, to cooperate. So, to cut the long story short, I went home blessed with that experience. Never ever regretted to have joined that reunion when, after all, it was me being the last or the youngest sibling who is very hard to reach then because I was so busy with my stuffs, with my business, so that the plan for reunion would complete. And glad enough that I now am gifted or blessed with the time and the opportunity to say yes to it, but more so that I was blessed that there was nothing that I also carry, like the gift that I carry from birth is the one I carry along to trash out the elements of our lives that made us very divisive somehow. Okay. And there started the joy of being reunited, hearing each other's stories of the past and making them understand why this and that. But it was very important from my end because I was the last sibling in the family whose downloads could have been very different from my other siblings, because what was then life for them earlier on has never been the life that was for me. Okay, and that spelled a lot of difference. And so moving home from that experience, I decided to finish on the modules that I had just started that worked very effectively to intervene the family members in that reunion. And so I looked forward that on the next reunion I could improvise on that and make a workshop out of it, which was the very material I shared to my friend for the success that it helped me in the event, in the family event that I had attended. And so coming back to this guy who came on my birthday very early on, I just woke up and we, excited to have him on the table as he is very close to the family. Okay, we had that simple meal. I was not yet part of the celebration. And while we were, having this simple meal served for him, we right away have to optimize the time that we can be together by him asking a lot of questions over the earlier materials I shared him, which centers more on emotion and how it is being generated inside us by a mind processing a thought. And so I started to extrapolate to him and one by one describe how that affects our life from the very thought that our mind dwells upon, and how it runs through the bloodstream and become part of our system, becomes part of our person through the attitude and the character that we wear, from the thought that becomes a belief, and from which belief now runs in the blood through the hormones that drives it, depending on how it is being processed by the gift of mind. We're talking about the conscious and the subconscious mind, okay? So it's a very deep discussion if we will go into details of it. But just to have an overview, it takes this mind, the gift of the mind that is powerful enough for creation began, because like the patterns of how God created the entire universe, it all began in his mind through a thought, and that everything that come into existence according to the Bible is all because of the mind of God, who were imagining these things to exist. And lo and behold, when he made us a part of his co-creatorship, as he pronounced the authority vested upon the human race when Adam and Eve was fresh from his hands in the Garden of Eden, and through the gift of marriage and as well as procreation that was part of such a gift, man and woman, as they come together to become one, to produce a third party or a sibling, to become the object of that love, which is where agape love can be experienced by the couple, the mother and the father, the man and the woman. Thus, from a triune God whose character is love, referring to agape love, which number should at least be three. That's why we come from the doctrine of the Trinity, a God who in the beginning was there to create everything from his mind, When this pronouncement was given to mankind to become a spectacle to the world around him, including the angels who were created ahead, because we were the ones who were gifted with the gift of procreation, and we become procreators with God. And to understand about how creation took effect, while procreation would involve gonads between the male and the female, but creation actually exists in the mind. The gonads were just actually the instrumentation for the emotions, just so we could experience the ecstasy and the bliss in the gift of procreation that you call sex, but actually that sex existed in the mind if you talk about how the start of that creation. And for a life to be formed, just like how the universe was created by a wise, loving God, we become a replica to how everything started. Because if you look at the number of galaxies in the entire cosmos, which there would be, I think, more than billion, if not trillions, that is perfectly symbolized by the number of cells that governs or that becomes the community in us, where in a human being we are a community of 50 trillion cells, which are all intellectual beings or intellectual cells, because they have their own sensors and signals that it can receive from the governor, who is the mind, meaning the mind being the leader. And the job of these 50 trillion cells in all our bodies from the different organs is nothing but to receive messages from how the mind processes depending on what thought it entertains, and the rest of the body will just have to comply. So if the mind thinks about a thought of pain, okay, from an insult or a hurt, the rest of the body would feel it, because that is the job of the every sentient cell, to comply to what the leader would command. Whereas if the mind entertains happy thoughts like love and peace and joy and bliss, that's when the entire body will be so empowered to be celebrative enough from the thought that the governor of the mind distributes through a chemical, because it is being processed by a neurotransmitter. That is how the mind mixes this chemistry in us that you call emotion. But actually, if you simplify that emotion from the physiological and neurological perspective, that thought that is being processed by the mind actually now becomes the emotion, which is depending on the kind of thought, because the way it is being created by a mind, as it is acted by the neocortex, and before it travels to the rest of the body, it goes to the midbrain or the limbic system, which controls our impulses, our reflexes, where the autonomic nervous system is consisting of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, that if you would look at it from the perspective of a vehicle, they function like, one functions like a gas pedal as we, operate on the car to navigate, but there is also another pedal for the brake and for the clutch to maintain the balance of how we navigate. That's the male and the female part of the brain. I'm talking about the conscious and the subconscious that generates or manufactures this emotion in us to influence the entire body for the actions that we can ever respond to what is being commanded by the commander, the mind or the brain. So that is how it is. And the very gift or the objective of why I allowed us to carry with us this gift of emotion at birth is, according to the Bible as well as science, they both intersect, that in the last trimester of us being formed inside the belly of our mother, fed by the umbilical cord, where nutrients and oxygens are passed to us. Like the account of Luke 1, where it talks about John the Baptist inside the mother's womb, leaping upon hearing the voice of Mary. It exactly is what science is teaching the scientific component or the intellectuals, that on the last trimester, when the fetus is still inside the womb of the mother, it can start to make up decision because an emotion has been formed. No wonder why. From the tummy or from the stomach of our mother down to when we are given at birth, until the first 6 years of our life, we develop more of the emotional brain, qualifying us to be more of an emotional being rather than logical. And that is why uh, we easily imbibe or we absorb culture's values, download at that young age when the mind has that frequency that can easily absorb whatever it hears, it feels, it senses through its five sensors. That becomes a part of our nuances, our character, because that is how we become identified to be a part of the progeny that we are, that we belong. Okay, so whatever are the nuances of our parents and the cultures in a given family, we inherit through this download, which would make it easier for us to be identified to be a part of that colony or that family. That is the purpose. And then growing up now with a filter, when we become a little more intelligent, when we now know how to decide what is right from wrong, from how we observe realities and how it affects us based on the gift of emotion, that being a feedback mechanism, whatever consequences of a certain belief that we were automatically downloaded and how we carry the result of it, we can actually dismantle, we can make alignments or changes, again, by how we manage a mind to entertain another thought, if only to guide us and direct us into a much better directive or journey. So if we had been always downloaded with not negative, not necessarily negative emotions, but disempowering emotions like emotions of lack, emotions of victimization, emotions of uh, very limiting emotions from a limiting belief that started with a thought, okay? So we operate through life in that manner that makes us very disempowered. So we feel always like we are down, we are always downhearted, we easily worry, we navigate life through fear, and we usually would covet by looking at what others have, the Ten Commandments, the law of life to for us to adhere on. But because it was downloaded that we were very covetous over a culture, over a practice that we have no filter about, and we get this download and we practice this culture, but then again, it did not give us the encouragement, the empowerment to move ahead and discover life to our fullest. And so we would, kind of reflect where we were wrong or where the flaws came from. And if we come to realize that it comes from a download that we have no choice about, then there is nothing to be afraid and be apprehensive of, because this being the result of sin that started in the Garden of Eden when our first parents believed on the lie of the serpent, and we all inherit this kind of inclination where every mankind or every species will always have three vulnerabilities, or we call this the imperative, life's imperative. No, uh, we can either be the tendencies or the inclination can either be we can be materialistic, or we can also be sensualistic, and or we can be proud. That is what the Bible will always hint about us. Our three vulnerabilities are our inclination to sin, which is part of our nature. And we never came to understand that if we rely solely on the Word. I'm not saying the Bible is not complete, but it doesn't have a simplifier to make us understand why we come to inherit, and we cannot even spot out the inheritance that we get as a legacy from our parents. We did not even know and realize that we have this in our tendencies. And to get out from there, which requires a reboot of a download, it takes scientific fact and knowledge which are measurable, okay? Which, when we go to the explanation of science, we can relate. And when we go back to how we were being taught by the Bible principles and premise, then we can now have a deeper, more profound understanding of our sinful nature. That's why I decided that I should open up a channel so that I can have an avenue or a platform by which I can share this to my viewers, to my listeners, how and why even at my age I am motivated to join the wagon, and to be a part of this race, even if technology-wise we were late at our age. So now you understand. At least I'm glad to have this opportunity to make a live broadcast just so I can make everyone, my followers, uh, get to have the what do you call this? The justification, the reasons why we took time to enter into this platform, because earlier on we brought this what we have discovered to the church, but even the church will have a hard time taking it because many of the churches are oriented with the doctrine on sola scriptura, so that if you would collaborate it with your knowledge from science, to some, if not to the majority, it becomes a big no to accept, believing that science is something that rejects God. Not anymore now when the advent of the 11 new sciences came into existence, because it is these branches of science that now entertains spirituality. Well, the most validated form of science was the quantum science or quantum physics, where out of the quantum principle, we get to have a view of how we need to understand the world much, much deeper and simpler. In fact, this was made simplified by a scientist in the person of Nikola Tesla, who once shared from his genius mind that if we want to understand the universe, we have to think of it in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Earlier than him, the founder of quantum physics, who happens to be Max Planck, and even earlier in the minds of Einstein, they already formulated this kind of a concept. And so with quantum physics on the rise, which was discovered as early as 1925 and 1927, this concept has crept, if only to correct what has earlier on discovered by Sir Isaac Newton, the founder of Newtonian physics, where life was based upon, and many practices to include the practice of medicine's medical science had their reference on what Newtonian physics thought about, which made us, or which oriented us that the world, the universe, can be viewed like a huge mechanical machine or engine. That if you want to know and study its parts, you just have to remove one part, especially if it's defective, study it and find replacement, and then that engine will function again. So if you look at the science of medicine and the practice of surgery, this is so applied such that an organ of a person that becomes defective can easily be transplanted with a new one coming even from other species or animals of the same species. That's the Newtonian science. And so we never worry much about anything that gets defective or becomes not functional, because the theory of the Newtonian science is the theory of replacing it. But if you look at the universe as energy, frequency, and vibration, where we are all created as energetic beings, processing energy from a thought. Thought is energy through vibration, frequency, and vibration. And so as that thought vibrates within, meaning it resonates, we now are being influenced by a law of resonance, the mind being a reticular activating system that resonates with the every concept that we get from a thought, because it's only our mind that processes a thought from the ultimate universe, where we call the mind of God, because all these things came from the mind of God that we see around. And so the energy that is being controlled by the character of God that happens to be love, that is designed for the entire cosmos to operate upon. These are the design laws actually that are so constant that if you alter them, like the law of gravity, the law of thermodynamics, the law of physics, the law of any such law that are constant, beginning with when everything comes to its place, any alteration to the 60th power, exponential power, will make this universe unlivable place. And that is the metaphor to the character of God, who was before, now, and after, the Alpha and Omega, the loving God whose character can never change. Now, the laws that were represented at in the Bible, the one especially that was given in Sinai, many of those laws were modified. Now, you cannot modify a design law because any modification to the 0.000 to the 60th level, if that law is modified, that makes the world unlivable. Okay? And that's why the God who gave to Moses that law at Sinai, if only to meet the mentality of the slave, it was just a distillation of his character. It was never really such called a law like any human law that we can imagine on, which actually dwells on a command, because those 10 commands actually are precepts that Mrs. White, a very good writer, talks about, that actually gravitates on the pretext that the Bible is talking or the character of God is talking, this law, because this law that was the subject of the war in heaven, which refers to the character of God, has been falsified by the arch enemy. That this law is unfair. The character of God is unfair, but love is not. And we see that all around in its manifestation and in how Christ, the second person personified or the impersonator of the triune God, okay, has demonstrated what this love is all about. And science happens to be the greatest simplifier. And when we understand the teachings of science that intersects with the Word, we can celebrate that it comes from a God who, if you'd come to think, is the greatest scientist in the entire world for being our maker and creator, whose principles that governs the entire cosmos are so constant that cannot be changed. So if you would compare that to the 10 Commandments that has been modified every now and then everywhere, it's all because we look at it as a command. And that could not have been the character of God that is unchanging, which is what agape love is all about. And so the purpose of this page, I have a page in the Facebook, Thought Massager TM, and or this channel is to inch by inch make everyone understand how important it is to live into these principles, because every moment we do away living with the principles that God instituted at the beginning before creation, because creation was the second wave of creation in as far as because it was how a replica, the microcosm world of cosmos was given form, which actually functions like how the entire universe operates. Okay, this one was when the solar galaxy was created with the Earth in there, where in the Bible it was very stipulated from the writings of Moses that Earth was part of what was it in the beginning. However, we're talking to verse 1, this Earth that was there in the beginning still doesn't have form, meaning it is unlivable, it doesn't have life. And so when you go through the second verse of the Genesis, which is describing the condition of the earth, which is void, unlivable, doesn't have light, doesn't have oxygen, which could be part of the abyss, that Satan and his angels went to isolate themselves after the metaphor of that war in heaven, which is a war of polemic war, meaning it was a war of words because it involves accusation of the character of God. And when finally a loyalty check among its followers were made in heaven for an inventory who believes over this concept, and it happens that there were 1/3 of them who sided with the arch enemy, that was when they decided to resign from their post in heaven and went into isolation to abyss. You will find where we're talking at on the writings of John the Revelator in Revelation 12, when it describes about the war in heaven. Okay? And so after that war, when the world was very busy engaging over the accusation of the enemy as Lucifer travels from all the planets, Isaiah described about him walking on fiery stones, which could be a metaphor of one galaxy to another, if only to influence every created beings that inhabits, if there were ever inhabitants. But the object of his lies were the angels, the loyal 2/3 of the loyal angels that left untouched in as far as their loyalty to the Son was concerned. And this was his objective, that he could win them in that war. And so a time was given. The loving nature and character of God never allowed to kill Satan and his cohorts from that great mistakes that happened in heaven, but they were given enough time to repent, to return to their post. And if you count on the number of years that was given when linear existence was already introduced through the terraforming of a planet in a galaxy called Milky Way, that was when 24-hour cycle was introduced, where before there was none. And if we started counting on the number of years then, that's why scientists could be true when they were talking about aeons, a certain period, because in the heaven of bliss before 24 by 7 linear existence was ever presented, it could have taken, there was no measure of time then, but it could have taken so long a time for Satan to be able to convince one third of the angels to his side. That war being not a war of swords and machine gun, but it was a war of merchandise and or of gossips. And it took him some time to be able to convince one third of the angels. And in the character of a loving God who is patient enough, considerate enough, and willing to wait until one could really reap the consequences of his choice. I'm talking of the choice of the enemy and the one third of the angels. If you look at the history after sin began on earth, in a new planet that was terraformed, in a new galaxy consisting of 8 planets, millions of stars, one moon and one sun, okay, that operates exactly how the entire cosmos operates, that being a replica. And another replica was given to Earth to represent the entire cosmos, which is a new species, a new breed of creation, where Christ, in his decision, would like to be a part of this creation. I'm talking of the human race. We are in a replica in as far as how we were created by the number of cells that compose our being. And the electricity that our circulatory system has been gifted on, which is actually comparable to the biggest city in the world, if that ever is New York City. That's how your circulatory system functions in all its stations, with a pumping station to supply electricity through the entire body, through its arteries and nerves, okay? And so you can also see that it functions like the traffic from the vagus nerve to the arteries to the smaller veins. The traffic of how blood is being transported is also comparable to a traffic in the biggest city of the world. So we're just a replica actually. God wanted us to realize that his wisdom made us so, that if we understand our design, then we could actually appreciate how God created us to symbolize the entire cosmos that he has created. So this is it, friends. I'm glad I had always been prodded on by a friend to go live. I never come to realize that this is my perfect time, my chance and opportunity to be able to make everyone understand on this channel the purpose of why, even at this late age, we join this race. This is not for anything. Of course, we hit the requirement to monetize because we cannot create more content unless we are monetized. That is the very reason. And now that we are monetized and we're operating here with the content that we have, well, we're mixed with random contents, but the majority of of the content that we shall be uploading will be more of motivational, transformational, which centers more on a mind entertaining a thought. Because to me and to my friends and to the rest of the world, we need to understand this universal gift, the gift of emotion, because it is the emotion that helps us navigate to the life of our dream. It is also the emotion that as we fail to reach the direction that we are going, that being a feedback mechanism can help us correct any moment we get disempowered, we get discouraged, we get low, because this does not only function like a GPS to guide us in our journey, in our direction. It also functions, the second purpose of this gift is to function like a fuel tank to refill us for the reserve of energy that we need in our journey, because as energetic beings we are sustained by the energy that we imbibe, that we process, which energy begins with the thought. And so in one of my recollection or seminars that I handled, I made the teachers realize the importance between the nutrients that we consider the food that we usually would store in our storehouse to prepare us for a crisis. We always would seek to, store so much food because we are so apprehensive that we would die if we lost supply of food. But I made him realize that the Bible has been telling us that we should not worry about food and other thing else, because the priority to worry is the bread of life, not over the bread that we eat, but the priority to worry is the bread of life, who happens to be the loving principle of Christ that sustains not only the entire cosmos but also sustains us. And if you look at our system, the importance between the nutrients that we get from our food and how it travels to be distributed to our organs and to our bloodstream to the rest of the body according to its speed of how it is distributed, it travels at the rate of 1 centimeter per second, meaning once you supply yourself with food that passes through your mouth and being initially digested by your salivary gland down to your stomach, from the stomach, it still has to travel into the duodenum, the beginning of the absorption of the nutrients that you take in, and finally ended in the jejunum, towards the section between your small, large, and small intestine, where absorption is complete to include the water and the vitamins. And the moment it is being absorbed by the alimentary canal, by the small intestine, to get into your blood, to circulate upon, that is when you would apply the rate of speed or its travel, which is 1 centimeter per second. Compare it to exercise into water. Exercise, when we say exercise, we're talking about the law of respiration, because you cannot exercise without air. And as you ingest oxygen to help transport your nutrients in your blood, which is needed by your brain to become creative, to have good thoughts, okay? Needed by your stomach to continue on the digestion, peristaltic movement. Needed on by your immune system for the white blood cells to provide you with the right or the white cell to convert into immune system so that we remain healthy and to combat against diseases. Now, when you ingest oxygen that gets through your lungs, the moment it enters there, right away it is being carried by the blood to supply the brain in the right auricle, and then after it gets there, it gets back again into the system. That quick, that easy. That's why it will take only seconds when you lose your supply of oxygen that will allow you to survive, right? Against nutrients, which still travels. So it takes at least 6 hours before all your cells can benefit. Oxygen, split of a second. Water, when you dehydrate yourself, you will not last for days. And so to simplify, when Christ was tempted in, just before his crucifixion, after his 40 days fasting, the fasting would indicate that man could not live by bread alone, because with air and proper hydration, it sustains life. That the minimum number of days by which we can survive without food is 40 days. But not oxygen. And if you would compare it to how you get affected by a thought, if I would shout at you and bully you any moment now, before I could end up my bullying, your entire body would feel my bullying. That's how quick a thought would travel in our entire body. And the 50 trillion cells that would respond to the message as it becomes a hormone or a chemical that runs into your entire system, with the thought, it travels that fast. With food, it takes about 6 hours, meaning Even if we supply ourselves with the best nutritious food, which takes at least 6 hours to digest or for our cells to benefit on. If something all along, if there is a trigger that shouts us at us to put down ourselves and humiliate us, or call us names that are very acceptable to our ears, you will see yourself automatically reacting. That's how important these thoughts are to us. That's why in my page on Facebook, I call this thought massager, because I would like to offer comfort into your mind as it processes whatever thought you have that disempowers you. And of course, in my YouTube channel, if you look at the materials that are recently uploaded, unlike the ones that were just there to catch for the watch hours, where it was more on the leisure and the travel exposure or blog, okay, right now we have started to come up with our uploads that is in line with our content. It's more about the importance of our mind processing a thought that gives us the emotion, that being our internal reality driver, as well as our driver to our external realities or our journeys. And as you continue to support me by looking into the uploads, the content that we provide you in our page, I hope you would come to appreciate and get enlightened as to discover more mysteries that life offer. Okay, life has been very mysterious. That unless we get to know how we were driven by this emotion that we were all gifted at, we can never uncover the mysteries that becomes our day-to-day challenge, that becomes part of our confusion, that becomes part of the passion, the crime sometimes that we commit, the medicines that we commit. But until, that's why I highlight on emotional intelligence, which is harnessing your mind to manage, to identify your emotion, especially its trigger. And by then, when we get to identify it, we will be guided as to how we can manage to control them. Because scientific steps of solving any problems involve 50% identification of the issue. The moment we get to identify, the moment we get to identify the issue of the trigger of our emotion, definitely we get to identify also, or we get to correct the journey that we travel, the roads we travel. Most of us don't, or many of us are not traveling on a straight line. That's what one reality of life is. And so we come to appreciate all these detours, the learning curves that we all experience in life, because it is in these curves that we get to be confronted and we see the different learnings that we can apply. That's why to many philosophers and motivational speakers, they would consider always teaching us or confronting to us that failures are always a stepping stone to the every level of success that we experience in life. So, mga ka-thoughts, if I am addressing to my FB fans and or followers, in my YouTube it's transforming thoughts. So still, mga ka-thoughts, if you would consider that we need to create more content for you to enjoy on in this channel, there is only one very simple thing I'm asking of you. To support to this channel is you just have to, if you can subscribe, so much the better. But if you cannot, because it's hard for you to subscribe, it means, what do you call this, email ad and all of the stuff. So I will just invite you to view on the uploads that we have, and view them to the point of not skipping every ads that you'll find along, tagged to the every downloads we have, be it short or long videos that can help generate revenue for us to help or to continue create more contents. And for the FB, there were some tools that were monetized on. If you happen to visit on my page, you have options to either send through stars that can help generate revenue to continue on the content creating. But also, like the one I'm asking you here, viewing the stream ads, my live, as well as the video that contains some ads that requires no skipping will help a lot. And so, this being my maiden broadcast, where the majority of my followers did not come to know that I'm here for this very unannounced broadcast, well, I'm just glad there was not much, you know, nuisance, or I would call it nobody was disrupting me in my broadcast, as I could elaborately explain the very reason for why I gave this opportunity to open up or to run a channel in the YouTube and open a page in my Facebook. Out of my expectation, for a very short period of time, YouTube has accepted my efforts and became monetized by a period of, if not less than, within the month. And that is why I'm doing this coverage, this live stream, to make everyone understand it. I'm still working on my Facebook page, because in terms of monetization there, I just actually achieved around 70 to 75%. There were other tools that I'm not able to set up yet, and I'm not eligible. And so I did more live there as a requirement, hoping that when I hit the bar, I would be able to enjoy being fully monetized. By then, I can guarantee that I could create more content, as this hobby is quite expensive somehow. It needs support. And I see the reason why Meta, as well as YouTube, is giving rewards to those content creators who are consistent enough in their uploads. So that's their way of supporting, so that the cycle of business would flow. Alright, so I'm nearing my 1 hour broadcast. I hope that you enjoyed the story I told you, how I was able to lay the foundation, the background, and the reference to why this decision. And I would be more glad if I would see my number of subscribers and our viewers improving here, to encourage me, to motivate me to continue to share the little that we discover in life, because personally, I got the benefit of my discovery. Secondly, when I was given the chance to make a trial and error on applying this first within my family, I see how effective was the material that I am now sharing to you. And so, driven by a little ambition in my mind, in my heart, I embark on this journey, hoping that I can influence, to as far as I can reach, people whose heart are open enough to listen to. Well, you can always validate. No, just a disclaimer. I'm not asking you to believe in everything that I say, but we have the word and science for you to get back on and violate. But the most effective fiscalizer, while I'm calling science as the great simplifier, and the word as the great source of truth, the greatest fiscalizer shall always be our experience, based on how we try these principles. And when it gets back to us through a feedback mechanism called emotion, that fiscalizes whether or not we believe what we hear here, or the concepts that we share has any truth to bear, to help us uphold and continue on to believe to what science simplifies, that always points to the teachings of the Word. That is my greatest conviction, and that is why I'm here for this program, for this passion. I'm not here to open up a new sect or to found another religion for you to follow on. We are not preachy here, and we are not preaching a religion or convincing that you follow a certain movement or sect. You can maintain where you are. You can still worship the God through your own religion. You can take home anything that you learn here to make your relationship with your God more strong, and apply it to your interpersonal relationship with the people you love in your circle, while you maintain your own belief, your own sect, your own religion. It doesn't matter. Because personally, I am a believer that there is no religion that can save us. The only passport that we will carry when you go to heaven is the character of Christ, which character can only be formed when we fully understand that loving principle that the enemy has maligned, because that principle which the Bible refers to as the law, at the same time, that law has the precept of the character of God that Proverbs and Psalms King David describes about. I'm talking about the undying love, the undying principle, the constant love that can never be modified from the time God started creating until the time He would return and take us to heaven. And so I'm a believer of this principle that if only we understand this fully in our heart, we can apply them beginning with ourselves, the people we love. Of course, because we first love a God who provided us all of this understanding through the gift of the mind and emotion that we all are recipient of. And so, personally, I grew with this understanding. I was a rabid believer in my faith, in my religion, and until I come about to entertain how science simplifies what I have been learning in the Word, it was then that I come to fully apply it in my life, improving my relationship with my God, and improving my relationship with my spouse and with my children, my family, and my friends. And I could tell a difference in the way my life operates now compared to when I did not have this knowledge of the great simplifier who is science. I'm not saying that science is greater than the Word. That is not my opinion. I'm only saying that science simplifies greatly what the Word which comes from God is teaching us. That could be very hard to fathom somehow. But when you merge these two, the great truth from the Word with a great simplifier that is measurable, and who would always come up with its concepts based on documented or validated facts. That is what science is all about. When you try to apply that in your life, you are the greatest fiscalizer, as you can always relate whether what you learn from both is true or not. And the measure of that is the gift of emotion, which functions as the feedback mechanism in us that guides us in the every direction we go, beginning with our internal selves, our internal reality, influencing how we see the world, how we put shades and meaning to the every reality that we see around. And if we have a good interpretation and understanding of which, applying beginning with ourselves, which we call self-love, then we benefit from this kind of love that we can give, because under the principles of loving, which is giving, you can never give what you do not have. So, a deeper, more simplified understanding of this principle, which happens to be the character of God, will definitely allow us to develop that very character, which becomes our ultimate passport to heaven. Religion could have been the channel by which we can learn from this. But if our religion fails to highlight the things that we can learn from the Word and science that we can validate in our experience, I'm not here to blame any religion in the first place. I'm not trying to debunk anyone. What I'm only saying is every religion that everyone belongs can never assure and guarantee your salvation. Okay? But they can be a tool to help us grow. Depends on how it feeds us with the right information, because ultimately, for any given transformation, the principle is what is precursor to it is right information. Meaning, if you can never see a trace of transformation in the person, there must be something wrong with the information that the mind of that person processes. So once again, let me repeat it back. Precursor to any given transformation is the processing or the understanding of the right information, without which there can never be any transformation to take place. The goal of Christianity is for us to transform. The goal of parenting is to lead every sibling to become mature and independent, so that in their own governance of loving, they can operate to life without having to depend on someone. Because to live in the dogmas of others is to live in the downloads or in the path of immaturity, which is not what Christ wanted us to develop His character, which is our passport to heaven. So may we learn from this broadcast today. May we imbibe something that will be a take home for all of us as we continue to navigate through life, properly guide us, and lead us in a better relationship every time we come to encounter and develop friendship with anyone, beginning with ourselves and to the God that we serve. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed, even if not one of you showed to my broadcast, but I hope that you learned from this interpolation or extrapolation. Good day to everyone. Okay? So I'm now announcing or signing off from this broadcast. May everyone enjoy. Have a good day. I hope I know how to put it off. Want to stop streaming? Okay.